Welcome to The Photography Guy. I'm your host, The Photography Guy. Let's get started here with another great photo show. Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome back, my friends, once again to The Photography Guy. This is episode number 64 for Sunday morning, November the 30th, 2014. I'm your host, Jack, and I'm going to help guide you through this magical world of photography, editing, and all things digital madness, I guess we could say. Hey, thanks for joining me here this morning to learn more about your camera and making great photographs. If you have a moment, please check out my website. That is The Photography Guy, or The Photography Guy, whichever way you want to say it, .net. ThePhotographyGuy.net, where you can comment on these shows and leave me some feedback. If you're listening to the audio podcast, thank you so much for tuning in and downloading the shows and subscribing to those. I really do enjoy it. But you know, you'll gain a little bit more insight if you watch the videos, and those videos can be found at 42 Technoman on YouTube. That's the number 4, the number 2, Technoman on YouTube. Please visit my learning site. A lot of you have, and I'm currently in the process of working on those Photoshop Elements 13 courses. And, you know, give me some time to roll those out. What's going to happen here is I'm going to open it up for new subscribers to join that course. And as I build it, you will be following along with me as I build it. So it's kind of a new way. Instead of me building all the videos and posting them, we'll be doing it a little piece at a time. Once again, that's jtclearning.com. And you'll find hours of photography training at a price that everybody can afford. Please join our Facebook group. If you're not on our Facebook group, please do that. And the Facebook group can be found at Jack's Tech Corner. We are over 430 some fans, or 430 some subscribers, or whatever you want to talk about on the Facebook group. It's free. We talk photography. We show our work off, and you know, we share projects that I base a lot of these shows on. I'll give you a project, and you can work on that project, or you can go to my YouTube channel, find a project, do the project there, and post it back on the Facebook group so we can all enjoy your great editing and your great work. So I hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving. If you do celebrate that in your part of the world, having the big feast of the turkey, the cranberries, which I don't eat anyway, but the turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, corn, muffins, man, all thank goodness, right? Yep, we had a great Thanksgiving dinner here. We had some family over, some friends came over. We had a big feast, and then I took the traditional Thanksgiving Day nap. You know, you got to take that. It just sneaks up on you. You don't even want to take a nap. You just lay down. I laid on the love seat, and if you ever seen a love seat, they're kind of short. So the next thing happened was I woke up and I had a stiff neck. My knees, I couldn't bend them anymore because I was scrunched in this little love seat. But hey, it makes for a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving day. And then what about Black Friday shopping? Anybody out there go Black Friday shopping? Well, let me tell you a little story about Black Friday shopping. We were really, really disappointed this year. We went out. We go out every year. It's a tradition with us, with our family. Myself, my wife, usually my oldest sister will go with us. And sometimes we'll have some of the kids with us. We had my youngest stepdaughter went with us this year. My daughter was working. My son was working. And the oldest stepdaughter actually drove her own car out this year and met us at the mall. Here was the letdown, though. As soon as we got there, my sister said, wow, look at all the parking places. Folks, this is 5 a.m., right? We got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, got dressed, got to the mall at 5 a.m., and it was just a letdown. Usually you can't even find a place to park. There's people everywhere. The hustle, the bustle, the movement of the shopping. We usually have such a great time. You know, it takes an hour to get a pretzel at the mall. Yeah, I know that sounds silly, but it's really a good time. Here's another letdown is every sale that happened, every major sale that you were going to buy, either for your computer or for photography, happened the night before, Thursday night. And you know, we didn't go out Thursday night because we wanted to spend Thanksgiving with our family. So retailers, listen to this. If you're listening to this show, retailers, shut your doors on Thursday night. And if you're a consumer, don't go out on Thanksgiving. Just don't do it. And then maybe we can send a message to these retailers that says, hey, look, bring Black Friday back and allow us to enjoy and take in and partake of those sales. And most of the stuff we went to find, it was gone. It was picked over and it was just all gone. So, there you have it. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, that's my little rant this morning about Black Friday shopping. How about all those cards that everybody's posting on Facebook? Good work. Congratulations. I put a video up on YouTube. If you didn't see it, go check it out at 42technoman. It is creating greeting cards, and I built a Christmas card from scratch. I show you where to find the backgrounds at. Anybody can use the template in Photoshop Elements. You click on create a greeting card. Okay, there's one Christmas card. Make it your own, and I show you how to do that step by step. So check out that video on YouTube. Well, today we're going to change things up a little bit here. What I am going to do before I take off onto this next tutorial here, we're going to look and see who else is in here this morning. Let's see. Addie, is it ADY? Good morning to you. It says, Black Friday, Jack, I got Photomax 5 for 30% off. Another program to learn. Hey, or Photomatics. I use Photomatics and I love it. It's a great program, and it works really, really well for HDR stuff. Let's see. Well, that's all that's in the chat room. That's unusual this morning, but good morning to you, Addie, ADY, and Jacob and Peter. Good morning to you in the chat room. Okay, so we're going to get started here this morning with learning your digital cameras. I thought, we talked about digital cameras, and we talk a lot about cameras and photography and how to take a nice picture, but I never really dig in too much about the settings of the camera. So today I thought we're going to talk about the settings of the camera, and I sat down, I pre-recorded some videos because it's a little bit easier than doing live shots in the studio, and I'll put these together for everybody out there to enjoy this morning. So we're going to kick back, relax, and we're going to watch these videos together. And there's about 14 of them. No, I'm kidding. I won't keep you that long. These shows usually only last about an hour, so I try to take in your time restraints for being here on a Sunday morning, as well as stuff I got to do today, like hanging Christmas lights. And my wife actually right now is cleaning windows, preparing those for wreaths. We hang wreaths on the windows. So she's getting those ready for me after the show so we can start into our daily routine here. But today's modern cameras, folks, have a ton of settings on it. And we spend a lot of money for these cameras. We spend anywhere from, even if you buy a basic point and shoot camera today, there's a lot of settings on that camera. And even if you're spending $200, there's a lot of stuff that people don't know. Most people turn on automatic and shoot away. And if you're paying more, you may pay upwards of $2,000, or maybe you bought one of the $6,000 or $7,000 bodies. And if you're watching this show and you bought one of the, $25,000 bodies, then, hey, I'm glad to have you on board here with us. But let's get started here this morning. We're going to first talk about some basic settings of the camera, discuss how those work. And then I thought we would we're going to discuss a little bit of manual mode, which we talked about a few weeks ago, but we're going to dig a little bit deeper into manual mode. We're going to talk about scene mode and how those different scenes work and how people expect them to work. And then we're going to talk about some shutter settings and some different variations of shutter settings. So I think I have a pretty big lineup for you this morning. So kick back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, and maybe get a pencil and paper. I'll take some notes along the way. And we're going to get rolling here with this first video on basic camera settings. And get started with today's topic that we're talking about here. All digital cameras have a lot of settings on, and the settings tend to get very confusing. I know they did to me when I first bought my first DSLR. I'm like, what are all those letters on top? Why has it got all these different S on here and CL and CH and Q, and what does all that mean? Do I really need to know about all of those settings? Well, let me tell you this way. You paid a lot of money for your camera. This camera is the Nikon D600. They run about, $1,800 to $1,900. So you put a lot of money into your gear. You want to get the maximum amount of bang for your buck. You want to get those photos that are crisp and that look very professional, because you're here to learn how to be more professional. So today we're going to start off at the top of the list here with the program modes on top. Now there's 4 main modes on a DSLR camera that we're going to talk about. as far as this Nikon goes. And these covers all the Nikons. The Canon cameras and your Sony cameras or whatever other SLR you may have. Now, it's an SLR, and we'll talk about cameras another time, but it's because we can remove the lens, and it's a single lens reflex camera. Not so much you can move the lens, but so when you look through the eyepiece, what I'm looking at is I'm actually seeing it through the lens. So it's a single lens reflex, okay, SLR. Now, with that said, there's some modes on the top, and we get into this talk many times over that you should only shoot in manual mode. Now that would be like only driving your car in reverse. In a car, we realize there's many different gears on the gear shift, but if somebody tells you only drive your car in D, you would never be able to go backwards. Or you would never be able to pull anything up a big hill because you wouldn't be going into low lock or something on your car, so that would be kind of silly. Again, when you buy a camera, you don't only want to shoot on manual. The modes are there to help you and assist you in getting that perfect photograph. Not a snapshot. Now, it's different from a snapshot. This is the perfect photograph. Now, the first mode we're going to talk to you about is the P mode, or program mode. Now, on a program mode on a camera, and I think on a Canon, if I remember correctly, I think it's PV. I believe that's correct. And you can correct me if I am wrong in the comments, I'm sure, of this video. But in the P mode, what we have is a program mode. This allows me to set things such as ISO setting. I can change my ISO if I want. I cannot change my shutter speed or my aperture. Now the P mode is allowing me to change my aperture settings, so you can change your aperture down. And what the P mode is basically is called the program mode. And when I tell people, it is one step up from the automatic mode. You notice we didn't talk about auto mode. The reason we don't talk about auto mode, that is one place where I ordinarily never put my camera. The only time I do, now there is, you know, an exception to every rule. The only time I do put my camera on the P mode, I mean on the auto mode, is when my family's together. One time we were at the Statue of Liberty, and we're standing in front. We wanted to get a group picture. So I wanted to hand my camera to somebody that don't know my camera. They have no idea what a camera is. But they want to use, they know how to use a point and shoot. So they want to look and click the shutter. So I turn it on auto mode and let the camera do all of its functions for it. So basically you're making it a $1,900 point and shoot, or if your camera was $1,200, or some cameras are $3,400. They all have an auto mode, and that would be the only exception why I would use it. In your P mode, program mode, what happens is automatic mode. Let's see if we can get it to work here. You can see that the flash pops up in automatic mode. Everything happens, the flash pops up, it's right because it's sensing everything you're going to need. You're going to need some light. It's going to set the shutter speed, the aperture, and everything for you. In program mode, you can see that I can focus and my flash does not pop up. So the P mode I like to tell people is auto with no flash, basically. Except that you can set your aperture, but it's basically auto with no flash. Just think of it that way. I used to shoot a lot on P mode. When I first got into photography some 20 years ago, you know, we shot just on whatever modes the camera was in. Mostly at that time it was manual. But as the cameras got progressively better, when I got my first DSLR even, I shot in P mode practically all the time because I didn't know any better, right? We didn't want to dig into the camera. We just wanted to pick it up and start shooting. I've shot a whole wedding in P mode. So it can be done. I'm not telling you it can't be done. You're allowing the camera to do its work for you, and it's going to take its best guess, and it's going to take some really, really nice pictures for you. So the next step up from P mode is the S mode. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken again, on a Canon, I think it's the AV mode. I haven't had a Canon for a while, since I last owned a Digital Rebel. Now in the S mode is shutter speed priority. What shutter speed priority does, it's very simple, right? It allows you to set the shutter speed of your camera, and when you're setting the shutter speed, the camera itself will figure out your aperture. And what's nice about this particular lens I got on here today, this is my 50 millimeter Nikon f1.8 lens. It was my first prime lens. Well, actually, to be honest with you, it's my only prime lens. And it was my first very low f-stop lens, so I can set it at 1.8 and use it in low light. That's what I purchased it for. I shot a lot of basketball games for the kids with this little fixed lens. But it allows the camera to go all the way down to f1.8. Now, if your camera, I received an email just recently and said, Jack, my camera, I was trying to get it down to that f2.8 you showed in one of your videos. But their camera only went to 3.5 because the f-stop, the aperture, is controlled by whatever is on the lens. So if you buy a better lens or more expensive lens, you'll have a lower f-stop or a wider opening of the lens, and it will allow your camera to sense that, because there's sensors in these lenses. And I'll just pull this out. That's what all the electronics is in the lenses and on the camera itself. So that's how it senses it. So in shutter priority mode anyway, let's get back to that. You're setting the shutter speed. The camera will figure out the aperture. This is an excellent mode when you're shooting movement. If you're shooting anything fast, we can set a very fast shutter speed. Make sure you have a lot of light, of course. Outside would be preferable to that. If you're shooting something very slow, you want to catch the slow moving water, and we've seen so many of these pictures. They're absolutely gorgeous. You put your camera on a tripod, you set your shutter speed down to a really slow speed. The camera will know what to do with the aperture. It will most likely close it down, because once you leave the shutter speed open longer, you're going to allow more light in. So it's going to close the aperture down, or go to like an f18 or an f12 or an f11, and it's going to allow less sunlight in. That is how the shutter speed priority works. The next mode we have is a aperture priority mode. Now, what aperture priority mode allows you to do is it allows you to do just that, set the aperture. Again, remember folks, you are very limited with the aperture based on the lens itself. If you have a 3.5 to a 5.6 kit lens that comes with the camera, the lowest aperture you can go to is a 3.5. The highest, or the closed down aperture you can go to, and this is weird, would be whatever the camera is set to. Because the number is just limiting us down. It's not limiting us up, if that makes any sense. It's really confusing, but and it takes a long time to catch on to that. But your camera will go to f22, even though your lens says 3.5 to 5.6. That's the low range, or the biggest opening that will go is 3.5. The reason lenses cost more, and we'll go into lenses another topic here, another episode, but lenses cost more based on their f-stop, based on how much light they're going to allow in, and how fast the lens is. I've found, many people tell you this may not be the case, but I have found that the lower the f-stop, the faster the focus is and the faster the lens is. So that is aperture priority mode. And you can use aperture priority mode anytime. Let's say we're going to shoot and we want a very shallow depth of field. So I'll set my camera and I'll drop this down to 1.8, and I'm going to look through my lens, and I'm going to change my point of focus, and I take that picture. And when I do, what happens is I can actually start to fade out or blow out, it's called the background. And my shutter speed at that time, did you hear how slow it was? There's very little light in this room right now. I just have one studio light on. Now, the shutter speed is 25. That's probably as fast as we'll get it, because if I raise the aperture, as I raise the aperture up, let's say 4.5, we're down to 4 on the shutter speed. If we go up to 6.3, we're down to 2. So that tells you, when you're indoors, you want to have a low aperture. And there is ways around that. And some of the ways around that we're going to talk about when we go to the manual setting on this camera. We're going to discuss the different variables and how many variables there could be. And I'm going to show you a great way to actually get the best possible picture out of your camera in manual mode, especially portraits. Okay, so just that a little bit of video itself has showed you that there's tons of settings on the camera that we have to get familiar with. And there's a basic way to do this. Let me get my camera here. There's a basic way to do this here with our cameras. And what I like to do is take the camera out and practice in the different modes, right? Go into the program mode, see what you can do with the program mode, and maybe take a shot in program mode, take one in shutter priority mode, take one in aperture mode, and then we'll talk about manual mode here in just a little bit. But these cameras are made for your or you being creative. So many people believe that, well, Jack, I'm going to go out and buy a new camera for so-and-so for Christmas. All right, well, that's wonderful. And they say, what should I buy? Well, right away I say, what are you going to take pictures of? Well, the kids playing in the yard, maybe vacation pictures, whatever. So we want to buy really, really good DSL. We want to, we have all kind of money, so we just want to spend $2,000. We've seen one of these really nice cameras. It's like, wait a minute. First of all, are you going to learn how to use that $2,000 camera? Just because you can afford the camera doesn't mean you have to buy the camera. They make different models, different brands, and different levels of cameras based on your expertise or what you want to do with it. So just because the camera is a DSLR and the lenses change, that's a selling point. But I met somebody once that bought a DSLR and has had it for about 5 years now and never purchased another lens. So having the interchangeable lenses, it was totally worthless at that point to buy something like that. Maybe you just want, I started out with, and I don't know where it is right now. I'm sure I tucked it away here. But I started out with a Fuji point and shoot camera because, I didn't know about settings. I just wanted to take digital pictures. So if you just want to take digital pictures and you're going to edit them up on Photoshop Elements and, you're going to make them pretty there and post them on the internet, maybe the point and shoot's all you need. I would recommend some of the, I like the Nikon Coolpix cameras though. If I was going to buy something small to carry around, it would be one of the Nikon Coolpixes. And then you can work yourself up to what they call a hybrid DSLR. A hybrid DSLR is a camera body with the lens attached. Now, folks, these lenses are pretty amazing. They'll go down, some of those will go down to 1.8 f-stop, and they'll go all the way up to, f22. Gives you a lot of creativeness. And then if you like photography, work your way up. Once you buy this camera and spend all the money, you spend $2,000 on a really good DSLR camera or more just because you can, and you leave it in the photo bag or the camera bag, guess what? You kind of wasted your money, right? Buy what you need. Don't buy what you can afford, I guess is the way I look at it. On the other hand, I guess if you think down the road, you're going to get into photography, it's a hobby you want to do. At that point, if it's something you want to do, you have the photography bug, then jump into it and buy the most expensive camera you can buy at that point. Because if you did like I did, I started with the point and shoot to kind of learn digital. I went to a hybrid. I owned a couple hybrids. I got a Canon Rebel, very low-end DSLR, and then just working my way up. And then I got on the kick was every time Nikon come out with a new model, I bought the new model. So it kind of drove my wife crazy because it seemed like about every year I was buying a new camera. But I guess that's because that's what I do is teach this stuff. But you get to a level you don't need it. With this D600, I've had it for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. And I've been really pleased with it. They took it back. They put a D610 shutter mechanism in here because the shutters were having some kind of dirt issue. Or I've never seen it, but I figure since they were replacing it for free, they did that. This camera will last me for quite a long time. I even dropped it once. It did hit the pavement, and it bounced up, and it didn't do anything to the camera, so that was pretty cool. Okay, so let's move on and move up then. So I told you on that last video we left off where we said, look, we're going to talk now a little bit about manual settings. And I think this is really key because you don't have to learn manual settings, but you have to understand it's there and how the different variations can affect your picture, your overall photo. So we're going to start talking about manual mode, and then I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Manual mode. Why is that? I don't really know. And I've been shooting a long time. I've shot a lot of manual mode, and I've shot a lot of the aperture and shutter priority modes, as well as I discussed in the YouTube video, the program mode. So there's tons of ways to shoot your camera. But in manual mode, you have the most creativity and control over what your camera is doing. Remember, in the P mode we talked about in the YouTube video, that the P mode is the program mode, which is allowing you to control ISO, and you're not using your flash, so you can control your flash. In the S mode, which is shutter priority mode on your cameras, that is where you're controlling the shutter speed of that camera, and the camera is controlling your aperture. In aperture priority mode, you are controlling the aperture, the camera is controlling the shutter speed. Now, in manual mode, we get to control all of that. Why do I shoot in manual mode? Well, if you watch the video that I did called Senior Shoot under, I think it's live shoots or on location on this site, which you have access to being a member, you will find out that the manual mode allows me to do things like control ambient light. It allows me to do things like slow down the shutter, and allows me to control the aperture very, very independently, as well as the ISO. When you can do that, you have full creativity range of your camera. That's so important and so critical. Now, there's a lot of other ways you can control your camera in manual mode, but let's talk about the first one. What you'll notice is when you have your camera in manual mode and you look at your settings on your camera, if I turn my aperture up to, let's say, 5.6, my shutter speed does not change like it does when I'm in aperture priority mode. The same thing, if I control my shutter, I can change my shutter speed down to 1/25th, and the aperture does not change because I'm controlling both of these settings very independently. Why is that important? Two reasons. One is, we already said, the shutter speed controls your ambient light. That's why that is really important. Such as this room right now, I have one studio light to my right, and it's coming in on this side of my face. So if I go to shoot this camera, I can shoot, and I'm shooting at a 5.6 at a 125, and it's a very, very dim lit picture, even though I'm shooting right into the light, because the shutter speed is so much faster. I'm going to try to show this to you right now to see if we can't bring this up here. We'll see if we can bring this in. You can see this. Let's bring it in there. You can see how dark that is on the back of the camera. And I'm shooting right into the light itself. So it's very easy to do that, to control ambient light. And you want to control ambient light, especially when you're outside. Because a lot of times with the bright sun, you may even have to control it more. And we'll talk about filters in another show. But you may have to use filters to even cut that ambient light down even more. Or put sunglasses on your lens to cut the light down so you can get the shot you want. Recently, and I mentioned on that Senior Shoot video, if you watch that, my wife was actually out with me, and she was holding up a big reflector. And we used that, the white shoot-through side of it, to block some of the light and dim it down, because we didn't have an ND filter with us. So again, in manual mode, if I take this now and I take my f-stop down to 1.8 and I take a shot, you would notice now that this is much, much brighter. And I'm going to show you this, how much brighter this is. We'll try to zoom this camera in again, get a good shot of this, and we'll come right in there. And you can see now how much brighter that actually is. And again, all I did at that point was I left the shutter speed exactly where it was. I just dropped the aperture down to 1.8. That is what manual mode gives us, folks. We have total creative control over these cameras, but you have to not be afraid of manual mode. Now, there is times, and I'll be honest with you, there's times even when I was taking those senior pictures that I would shoot in aperture priority mode because I knew I wanted a small aperture. And I would shoot at, some people call it a wide open aperture, small, however you want to look at it. I would shoot at an f1.8 or an f2.8 because I was looking for that shallow depth of field behind it. And we'll talk about that in one of the videos, how you would actually maintain and get that shallow depth of field. But you know, then I would flip over to manual mode. Some people will tell you, set it to aperture priority, look at your settings in the room, say, oh, 1.8 would be, 125 would be, or 100 on the shutter speed would be good exposure. Flip it back to manual mode, change it to 100, take a shot, and you're going to have pretty good exposure because you just kind of did a little bit of a cheating there. Now there's a better way, and we will go deeper into this device also in another video, but I'm just kind of giving you an overview of manual mode to try to help you out. There is this little device. This is my little gem. I love this device. I purchased it some time ago. This is my Sekonic L358 light meter. And this light meter allows me to control both things, or look at both things, ambient light as well as flash. And I use it a lot with my flash, with my strobes, with my speed lights. But if I turn it on here, I have it set to ambient light, and I knew in a darker room you would take your ISO setting and raise it up. And we'll talk about that under shooting videos. We'll talk more about shooting and how we can set the camera up to get the best possible shot. I like to shoot at ISO 800. Sometimes if I'm not using any lighting in a room, I'll go to 1600 on my ISO setting, because of a full frame camera you can do that. But don't be afraid to take your DSLR camera to a higher ISO level. The software will take the noise out, and it's very easy to do. Now, with that said, I'm going to have that set at 800, and what I'm going to do now is just simply push the button on the side here and kind of hold it to my chin and get a reading. I'll leave it go, and it will give me a reading. It shows me the camera should be set at 4.0, and for a 1/20th of a second shutter speed. So 1/20th of a second shutter speed at 4.0 at ISO 800. Now if I turn the ISO up, I want to just tell you what's going to happen. If you turn the ISO up, what will happen is you'll be able to achieve faster shutter speeds. And believe me, the faster the better, because the shutter speed itself determines if you have any camera shake. So if I have this on the tripod, I'm okay. I can shoot at a shutter speed of 20 or 30. I'll be just fine. If I'm hand holding it though, I probably want to get my ISO to about 2500. That 2500 would give me 1/60th of a second, and 3200 would give me 1/80th of a second, which I could shoot at 3200 very comfortably with my D600, or I could shoot at 5000 and get 1/25th of a second shutter speed. So that's a nice faster shutter, not fast, but faster, very easy, comfortable to handhold. You should be able to handhold your camera down to about 60 very comfortably with no problem. So, but again, the light meter is a very much of a friend. It took me years before I bought one because it is expensive. I mean, a light meter, and we'll have another class on light meters just to talk about this all together and show you how we can use a light meter to get different percentage ratings, and it's pretty cool stuff. But a light meter is one of those things, like, it is a true godsend to have. Yes, the camera does have a built-in light meter, and we'll talk about using that one time or another. But what happens is many times you can't use it for flash. It's just not going to help you for flash. And I know you can use the creative lighting system, or you can use Canon's creative system that controls the light based on how much light's in the lens, which is cool and that works really well. But this little thing here is a godsend. If you can afford to have them, and doing enough senior pictures, it saves us so much time. Even with weddings, to walk into a hall and get a reading with this thing without even have to pull the camera out of the bag, I got ideas of what kind of lighting I need to use. So it works really well. Well, okay, so there you have it. That's the manual settings. And under your manual settings again, you know, I talk about at the end of that video, we talked a little bit about the built-in light meter and how that light meter works. I'm going to try to show you on the back of my Nikon here. I was trying to see if I can bring it up here. And I'm going to try to show you on the back of the Nikon. It's the meter here in the lower, it should be your lower right-hand, lower right-hand side. And it's right here. This is the built-in light meter right here, okay? Now, on that built-in light meter, if you change the shutter speed, we're going to actually go in the back here. You change the shutter speed, you can see the shutter speed is changing. We're going to lower the shutter speed down. You can see when it gets to 0, right there. When it hits that 0, that center mark, that is the perfect exposure. If you go below, you're going to be underexposed. And you can see if we get the shutter speed up, and if I take a picture, what's going to happen, it would be very overexposed. So there's just a brief little way, and hand holding this thing backwards is a little tough. I'm going to take that shutter speed and turn it back down to where we're at perfect exposure. And now we'll take a picture. And you'll see now the exposure is better. So there is a built-in light meter in your cameras, in your DSLRs. And if you don't see it, the one reason you won't see it, actually, let me shut this back off, is if your camera's not in manual mode, you won't see it. Let me make sure that is true to fact here. Yeah, so I'm in aperture priority mode. I don't see my built-in light meter, shutter priority mode, and program mode. And the reason that is, your camera's not broken. But the reason that is not showing is because in aperture priority mode, shutter priority mode, and in program mode and automatic mode, you don't need to see the light meter because the camera's metering the light for you. The camera's a smart little guy. I mean, that's what he does. He takes pictures, right? And it knows how to meter a scene based on its circuitry in here and all the stuff inside. You pay for it because you're not only paying for the settings of the cameras, you're also paying for all the stuff inside, all the components, the electronics that make the digital pictures happen. So that is manual mode. So do you need a light meter? You know, you definitely do not need a light meter. Does it make your life a little easier? Yeah, sure, it does make your life easier, but everything we buy for photography makes our life a little easier. You know, from taking pictures in a house or inside. The first wedding I went out and did, we had no flash. We had no strobes to use. So I kind of hung around the videographer, and I would have him shine his light in the direction where I needed him, and then I would take my pictures. Was that the best case scenario? Absolutely not. So the next time it made it easier because we bought some flash, and we started using flash. All right, what we're going to talk about now here is the scene mode on your camera and how to interact with that scene mode. These are pre-settings on cameras, and scene modes could be anywhere from landscapes to sports to nighttime shots, and there's just a ton of stuff to know about your camera and scene modes, and it can give you a really nice effect. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but this again is just a creative part of controlling your camera. So let's go ahead and talk about the scene mode and check this out. Hi, let's talk now about some other settings of our camera and what we're going to be using these settings for. What we're going to be using these for now is a few other settings on your camera. And I'm sure Canon has this. This is, again, my Nikon camera, but I'm sure Canon has this. The first one is called scene mode. This is even shooting the camera below automatic. Automatic is, in other words, a more professional setting than scene mode. But scene mode has its places. I'm going to go over some scenes that my camera has, and maybe yours will have those also. So it's in scene mode, and if I turn the little jog wheel on the back of my camera right here, right at the very top here, I can turn that jog wheel, and shut that off again. And when I turn that wheel, it tells me here, there's party indoors, beach, snow, a sunset. So if I'm going to shoot a sunset, I don't even have to think about it. I can put it in scene mode and let the camera figure it out. Dusk or dawn pictures, a pet or portrait, a candlelight, such as for a birthday party. We talked about that in the other video. A blossom, autumn colors. I may try that today. Food, a silhouette, high key, low key. And if you don't know what these mean, that's okay. We'll talk about them some other time. A portrait, a landscape, child, sports, close up, in other words, macro shot. We'll take a picture of something here, maybe this cup. So we took a picture of that cup with macro mode. Okay, let's turn that back off. We have night portrait, night landscape, party indoor, and back to the beach, snow, and the sunset. So those are scene modes. Again, they have their place in photography. I'm not saying don't ever turn your camera on a scene mode. If you feel so inclined and you want to do it and try it out, try it. You know, I've never really used them, but it's something I'm going to go out and I'm going to shoot with it, and then I'm going to shoot in manual mode, and then I'll shoot in one of the other settings we talked about in the other videos. But the overall funny thing about this is that it is there. And like I said, it is actually below automatic mode on your 35mm. The next one, at least on this Nikon camera we're going to talk about, is U1 and U2. I'm going to lock these together. Sometimes, and even though I've been shooting for 20 some years, many times, no, not many, sometimes, some very few times, I'll take my camera from indoors with a high ISO setting. I'm shooting at 1600 indoors in the portrait studio here. And I go out and I go to shoot a picture of a landscape. I'm snapping away, I'm taking some shots, and one thing that, because even, and I tell my wife this all the time, even people that teach sometimes get stuck in this weird case scenario where they don't do what they say to do, what they tell others. You may be doing it, but then I forget or I just don't do it. You should always take your camera whenever you're going to a new place, wherever it is. If I'm shooting upstairs and I go downstairs, I should relook at my settings and reevaluate my settings to where I'm located. If I go outside, I should check my ISO. Never take anything for granted. I try to remember to always reset my camera to a certain setting before I put it back in the bag. That way, if I just take it out and I grab it and run, it's ready. I normally drop the ISO back to 100. I normally set the f-stop back to the lowest for the lens. Excuse me, whichever lens I may have. And I also set the shutter speed to 125. If I put the camera like that and put it in the bag, I'm pretty comfortable I pull it out. If I take a quick shot, I'm going to get something usable. But if you're shooting landscapes on a beautiful sunny day and your ISO set at 1600 or higher, I mean, they're still usable pictures, but there's issues there. You don't want to do that. So user 1 and user 2 is, I set user 1 up to do portrait shots indoors. I set it for that low aperture, that ISO of 100 or 1600, depending, because if I use studio lighting, I use ISO 100, so depending on where I'm at. Then I use user 2 to set it up for ISO 100, the f-stop usually at f11 to 18, and the ISO setting, like I said, at 100, and the shutter speed at about 200 to 250. The reason I do that is when I go outside, I can just flip this to user 2, and I know those settings are ready to go. So I have a good baseline to start off with my camera. User 1, I come in to do a portrait, turn on user 1, leave it in the bag that way. It's good to go. I know I'm ready to start my portrait session. So that's what those are for. So it's scene mode, user 1, and user 2. Okay, so hopefully you picked up something there, and I'll see you back on the next settings video. Okay, so I hope you got a lot out of these different settings today and understand a little bit more about your camera, your digital camera. We were talking about, and I'm going to give you a true story because, as I said in that video, sometimes even the teacher can make a mistake because I teach you guys every Sunday, and you would think, hey, Jack takes his camera out and it's perfect every time. That's not even true. Sometimes I take my camera out, we stop, and this is a true story. We stop, I pull the camera out and I start shooting. And this is kind of will clue you into what your ISO setting is. Because most times when I take my camera out of the bag, I've been learning, here's a secret. Before you put your camera in the bag, always turn it on, go to your ISO settings. Like right now, mine's on 2000 because I was playing in the studio this morning. Turn it down to 100, turn it off and put it in your bag. That way, it's always at the lowest ISO setting, right? So 100. So we're always letting the most amount of light into our sensors. Or I'm sorry, letting the least amount of light in the sensors at 100. 2000, we'll let more in. Here's what clued me in. So we went on a weekend trip and went to the mountains. I jumped out of the car at an overlook. I took my camera out of the back of the car, and I started shooting. And I'm looking and I'm wondering, why am I shooting? Why in the world do I have to shoot this? The shutter speeds, and the shutter speeds I was getting to was, let me even look here and see if I can get up into that range. I was shooting at 2000 and at 2500. 2000s and 2500s shutter speed. I mean, that is super fast. But my light meter was saying, hey, that's perfect exposure. Yeah, sure it was. And I didn't think anything of it. It didn't dawn on me. I was like, well, okay, that seems right. I mean, the light meter's perfect. So then we went, and I could show you some of these pictures sometime. We're not going to do it today because of the lack of time for the show today. But we went to a place called Ohio Powell. And in Ohio Powell, there is a place, a house built into the riverbed. Really cool place, really great place for pictures. I'm shooting these pictures. I'm shooting the architecture of the building. And I'm telling my wife, man, I'm getting some really nice angles. These are going to be some really great shots. And again, I look and I'm shooting at, 2000, 2500 shutter speeds. Which normally outside, if you set it ISO 100, you'd probably be setting, shooting around 200, 1/200th of a second, not 1/2500th of a second. And when I got back to the hotel room that night, we sat down, I put the pictures onto Lightroom, and it dawned on me right away. In Lightroom, when Lightroom came up, it started to tell me the settings, under each picture. And if your Lightroom does not do that, when you're in the album mode, hit the letter I on your keyboard, you'll see information about each picture. It was telling me the ISO setting was set at 2000. So what happened was, if you shoot at a very high ISO range and you have a lot of light outside, what's going to happen is you're going to be working with a lot of noise in your picture, the graininess, the noise of your picture. That's exactly what happens. So yeah, even the teacher can definitely make mistakes. I mean, nobody's perfect. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you make a mistake, don't throw your camera in the trash can and say, I'll never shoot photography stuff again. That's just stupid. I can't get it. You can get it. Just take your time. Always set your cameras back at ISO 100. Try to get a base range for your cameras. And I always set my shutter speed back usually to about 125, 1/25th of a second. And my f-stop, I usually drop that down to, just anything fast would be 4.5, 5 or 5.6 in that range. So once my camera is set at those settings, then I take it, I turn it off, and I put it in my camera bag. That way, when I pull it out the next time, if I'm outside, I'm going to get some pretty good shots. If I'm inside, I got to make some adjustments to the camera, and I understand that. So it's not a big deal to have to do that, adjust those settings. So, folks, I want to thank everybody for tuning in with me here this morning. I want to thank you for downloading my shows on iTunes. You're downloading the audio shows on iTunes and subscribing to those. I want to thank everybody out there that's been subscribing to the videos on YouTube. You're making it a huge success. The viewership and subscription ratings have been going up, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate you watching the videos all the way through, because it's called a bounce rate. If you watch halfway and say, I don't want to watch anymore, it's called a bounce rate. That's a bad thing. Watch it all the way through. One guy even said if you refresh the page, sometimes it gets more views. I don't understand how that works, but that's something to talk about. I do have my DVD collection still available. If you want to check those out, go to jackstechcorner.com. We're not going to harp on that. But what is available is jtclearning.com. That's the online learning environment. The online is even a better environment than the DVDs. You get the same videos on both, but when you're online, if I think of a new edit or a new video or something, and I'm going to add it to the course, and you're taking the course on jtclearning.com, you will get that new video. If I mailed you a DVD a year ago, I'm not going to mail you one video. That's just not the way it happens. You can sign up for that. Begin learning Photoshop Elements 12 today, And as I said, I am going to be working on Photoshop Elements 13. So if you sign up for that, I might have an early bird special for Elements 13, and you can be with me as I build that course. So that's probably the way I'm going to do that. Let's see. That's about it. That's going to be wrapping it up there. I'm going to go back here just real quick and see if there's any other questions in the chat room. There doesn't seem to be. I want to thank everybody, though, for watching live in the mornings here on Sunday morning. I appreciate you being around. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you say live. What's live? Live is just like watching it on TV, but you sit in front of your computer and you get to watch it. We're also on the Roku box. If you have a Roku, you can download the app for live stream. You can also watch us on your iPad, your smartphone, any smartphone. There's an app for that, right? So you can watch us on your smartphone as you're driving down the road. If you're going shopping, or no, don't watch us when you're driving. That would be silly. Anyway, but you can watch us live at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's on the East Coast here in the States. So right now we're looking at 10:51 a.m. I don't know what time it is in your part of the world, but I understand I have a friend here, Peter, in the UK. He says it's in the afternoon, so this show works out great. If you're in China right now, it might not work out so great. You might have to stay up really late at night to hang in there and watch the show with us. So anyway, but I do thank you for joining me there live. Once again, take care. Have a great work week if that's at all possible. If you're going out deer hunting, that's what's happening here in the States. Be safe and, protect yourself. Wear a lot of orange. Make sure people can see you out there. And sometimes it's better to shoot the deer with your cameras than it is with a gun. Of course, I know the camera won't keep, me from hitting them with my car, but still, I'd rather have a picture than a dead animal any day. So, but anyway, good luck if you're hunting. I hope you get a nice buck. Take care. I'll talk to everybody next Sunday morning on The Photography Guy. Bye for now. Thanks for tuning into The Photography Guy. I am a photography guy, and I'll be here once again next time for more photography tips and tricks. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the show and enjoy the music.